Should I start now?
Yep.
Alright, so after the end of World War II, the world was split into two, East and West. This marked the beginning of the era known as the Cold War. Alright. The conflict pitted the world's two great superpowers, the Soviet Union and the United States of America, against each other in a prolonged conflict that only really truly ended until like the 90s. Though people argue that it's still going on today given the current relations between the US and Russia right currently. And of course, the US and Russia weren't the only people fighting this Cold War. They used many proxies, so they didn't get directly involved, even though they were. I mean, we all know that, right? So, each side in this conflict wanted to prove their own superiority through, ideology, technology, and through overall prowess in combat and stuff. So, the advent of a nuclear weaponry completely changed the game for the arms race between these two nations. America's bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki showed the world the terrible and chilling effects of a nuclear bomb, but also how devastatingly effective it was. It basically caused Japan to surrender, and then America didn't even need to send in their own boots on the ground. Like, they suffered essentially no losses. Japan took the brunt of all that, and they gave in. So, some say war has changed. Others say war never changes. Well, I agree with both statements. I think war has changed because how we fight conflict has been evolving through the centuries. We went from just flinging rocks at each other to shooting arrows to using firearms. Went from again rocks to hatchets to blades to knives. Went from simple catapults and stuff to basically missile launchers and then other systems that can knock targets out of the sky or launch strikes at any point in the world, essentially. So, this led to MAD, mutually assured destruction. So, we all know about nuclear weapons technology, right? Well, think about this. So, each side in this conflict had dozens upon dozens of nukes, enough to basically mess up the whole world, basically kill every human on this planet. And people during the time had to live with the knowledge that basically any night they were alive, they could be basically evaporated in a nuclear hellstorm. And that's pretty crazy, because I have relatives that lived through that time. They told me they were honestly fucking just scared for their lives. But I'm not fully talking about nuclear weapons technology here. I'm talking about a component which actually led us to the space race. So, we have missile technology and such, intercontinental missiles and such. Well, the Soviet Union launched their first satellite, Sputnik, into Earth's orbit. I don't know when. I'm pretty sure it was during around the mid-50s. But basically, this showed America that they had really powerful missiles that could deliver payloads anywhere. Plus, they were the first into space, the final frontier. Where no man has gone before. The Soviets were beating the United States. They didn't like that. So, this led to the formation of NASA, led to their own space programs. The US launched their first satellite, the Explorer, right into space. This basically kickstarted mankind's expansion into space right here. I mean, people have been researching celestial bodies and stuff for a long while now, but this is the only real time we finally got there, right? So, alright, well, take a little breather. Alright, so, NASA's budget increased by over about like 500%. Basically, everybody was really focused on this whole space race. Like, I mean, war is pretty ugly, but I mean, we can't deny that it's like led to some really nice advancements for human technology. I mean, radio and stuff, basically everything we have right now, it was developed and used like for the government, mainly by the military forces, but before eventually progressing into civilian use. And so, but honestly, people don't really care about that. The thing is, well, I don't think space is boring, but to a lot of people, just looking at some kind of black void, it's not their idea of a good time. So that's why eventually manned missions became more of a priority for the US and the Soviet Union. The Soviets beat out the United States with the first man in space, and I mean, on its own, like let's say a spacecraft and such, I mean, it's just a hunk of metal. Put a human being inside of it, and people take notice, they're going to start caring, because human lives are on the line here. If you mess up, that guy's dead. So, the Soviets beat the US. The US eventually sent their own man in space, but by that point, the Soviets' accomplishments are, a lot. And then, that leads us to the moon landing. Now, this was a really, really like, just breathtaking endeavor. Like basically, they wanted to like deliver these two guys, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin, to the moon, but before the Soviets were able to put their own guys there. And like sending something into orbit on the Earth is one thing. It's just making two guys go to another planet and then back. That required like tons of math, a ton of logistics, just like a ton of support. I mean, yeah. So eventually they did that. I mean, people are gonna say that like, honestly, I have relatives who also like witnessed the moon landing with their own eyes. They said it was honestly pretty boring, but the only real aspect kind of keeping it there that kept them glued to the screen was that there were these two guys left Earth and they're on the moon, like. The moon. Nobody's been there before. And so they just, saw like those famous words, one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Saw those saw all that jargon stuff, like Armstrong and such, saying something about making some additional maneuvers and such, and then on the Earth, scientists and stuff were all panicking and such because I mean. They planned this perfectly, and basically one small mistake could just mess everything up and stranded them both on the moon to die, and they would have caught that on TV. But things pulled through. They got back to Earth, and that moment's been immortalized in history. Now, in recent times, it's like people have lost interest in space. They're planning on cutting the budget to NASA and such. But we are seeing the rise of more private endeavors like SpaceX. I'm sure you guys have read about that recently. Well, Elon Musk is at the head of that. He's also known for Tesla, if any of you guys know that. Anyway, SpaceX has been taking on contracts and stuff for the United States. They've actually made reusable ships and such. And to resupply, I think, the International Space Station. So those guys still have their supplies. Recently, they've also unveiled the Raptor engine, which is what they're going to use for an eventual manned Mars mission. I mean, Musk has said he wants to get a guy up there in 6 years. But back to the Cold War. So if you think about it, basically all of this whole space race, our expansion stuff happened because of war. Because these guys basically want to kill the other guys as fast as they can. Led to the development of the technologies necessary so we could even get a foothold in space. And now we're just looking on expanding and such. And I mean, that's really all I have to say. The importance of looking back on history. what it's done, and I guess even some good can come out of the bad. That's all.